क्यों दिया रविंद्रनाथ टैगोर ने सेन को ऐसा नाम? कैसे बंगाल का पैमान ब्रिटिश में था? क्यों कदर मियां नाम के एक शख्स खून से लिपटे थे इनके घर के सामने आके रुके? मोदी एक डिक्टेटर क्यों है? नमस्कार गाइस, आज हम अमर्त्य सेन के लाइफ को डिकोड करने जा रहे हैं। उनका करियर, उनकी लाइफ लॉन्ग जर्नी और पब्लिश्ड पेपर और कुछ थ्योरीज के बारे में आज इस वीडियो में पढ़ने जा रहे हैं। तो लेट्स स्टार्ट द वीडियो। कौन थे अमर्त्य सेन? अमर्त्य कुमार सेन का जन्म 3 नवंबर 1933 को हुआ। He was an Indian economist and philosopher who since 1972 has taught and worked in United Kingdom and the United States. Sen has made contributions to welfare economics, social choice theory, economic and social justice, economic theories of famines, decision theory, development economics, public health, and the measure of well-being of countries. He is currently a Thomas W. Lamont University professor and a professor of economics and philosophy at Harvard University. He formerly served as the Master of Trinity College at the University of Cambridge. He is awarded as the Nobel Memorial Prize in Economic Sciences in 1998 and India's highest civilian honor, Bharat Ratna, the following year for his contribution to welfare economics. The German Publisher and Bookseller Association awarded him the 2020 Peace Prize of the German Book Trade for his pioneering scholarship and addressing issues of global justice and combating social inequality in education and in healthcare. Early life and education. Amartya Sen was born in the Bengali Hindu Baidya family in Santiniketan, Bengal, British India. The famed polymath and writer Rabindranth Tagore gave Amartya Sen his name, Immortal. Sen's family was from Wari and Manikganj, Dhaka, both in present-day Bangladesh. His father, Asutosh Sen, was a professor of chemistry at Dhaka University, Development Commissioner in Delhi, and then chairman of the West Bengal Public Services Commission. He moved with his family to West Bengal in 1945. Sen's mother, Amita Sen, was a daughter of Kishti Mohan Sen, the eminent Sanskritist and scholar of ancient and medieval India, who was a close associate of Tagore. K. M. Sen served as the second Vice Chancellor at Vishwa Bharati University from 1953 to 1954. Sen began his education at St. George Gregory School in Dhaka in 1940. In the fall of the 1941, he was admitted to Path Bhavana Santiniketan, where he completed his school education. The school had many progressive features such as distaste for examinations or competitive testing. In addition, the school stressed the cultural diversity and embraced the cultural influences from the rest of the world. In 1951, he went to Presidency College, Kolkata, where he earned a BA in economics with first in the first class, with a minor in mathematics as a graduating student of the University of Calcutta. While at Presidency, Sen was diagnosed with oral cancer and given a 15% chance of living 5 years. With radiation treatment, he survived, and in 1953, he moved to Trinity College, Cambridge, where he earned a second BA in economics in 1955, with a first class topping the list as well. At this time, he was elected as the president of Cambridge Majlis. While Sen was officially a PhD student at Cambridge, though he had finished his research in 1955 and 56, he was offered the position of first professor and first head of the economics department of the newly created Jadavpur University in Calcutta. He is still the youngest chairman to have headed the Department of Economics. He served in that position, starting the new economics department from 1956 to 1958. Meanwhile, Sen was elected to a prize fellowship at Trinity College, which gave him 4 years of freedom to do anything he liked. He made a radical decision to study economics plus philosophy. Sen explained, "The broadening of my studies into philosophy was important for me, not just because some of my main areas of interest in economics relate quite closely to philosophical disciplines. For example, social choice theory make intense use of mathematical logic and also draws on moral philosophy, and so does the study of inequality and deprivations. But also because I found philosophical studies very rewarding on their own." His interest in philosophy, however, dates back to his college days at Presidency, where he reads books on philosophy and debated philosophical themes. One of the books he was most interested in was Kenneth Arrow's Social Choice and Individual Values. In Cambridge, there were major debates between supporters of Keynesian economics and the neoclassical economists who were skeptical of Keynes. Because of the lack of enthusiasm of a social choice theory in both Trinity and Cambridge, Sen chose a different subject for his PhD thesis. which was The Choice of Techniques in 1959. The work had been completed earlier, except for advice from his adjunct supervisor in India, Professor A.K. Das Gupta, given to Sen while teaching and revising his work at Jadavpur under the supervision of the brilliant but vigorously intolerant post-Keynesian John Robinson. Quinton Sinner notes that Sen was a member of a secret society Cambridge Hospitals during his time at Cambridge. During 1960 and 61, Amartya Sen visited the MIT on leave from the Trinity College. Research work of Dr. Sen. Sen's work on choice of techniques complemented that of Maurice Dobb. In developing country, the Dobb and Sen strategy relied on maximizing investable surpluses, maintaining constant real wages, and using the entire increase in labor productivity due to technological change to raise the rate of accumulation. In other words, workers were expected to demand on improvement in their standard of living despite having become more productive. Sen's paper in late 1960s and early 1970s helped develop the theory of choice, social choice, which first came to the prominence in the work of the American economist Kenneth Arrow. Arrow had most famously shown that when the voters have three or more distinct alternatives options, any ranked order voting system will in at least some situation inevitably conflict with what many assume to be basic democratic norms. Sen's contribution to the literature was to show under what conditions Arrow's impossibility theorem applied, as well as to extend and enrich the theory of social choice, informed by his interest in history of economic thought and philosophy. In 1981, Sen published Poverty and Famines, an essay entitled Deprivations of 1981, a book in which he argued that famines occurs not only from a lack of food, but from the inequalities built into mechanism for distributing food. Sen also argued that the Bengal famine was caused by an urban economic boom that raised food prices, thereby causing millions of rural workers to starve to death when their wages did not keep up. In 1999, he wrote, "No famine has ever taken place in a functioning of democracy." Sen's interest in famine stemmed from personal experience. As a 9-year-old, he witnessed the Bengal famine of 1943, in which 3 million people died. This staggering loss of life was unnecessary. Sen later concluded he presents data that there was an adequate food supply in Bengal at that time, but particular groups of people including rural landless laborers and urban service providers like barbers did not have the means to buy food, as its price rose rapidly due to the factors that include acquisitions by the military, panic buying, hoarding, and the price gouging, all of them connected to the war in the rain. In the Poverty and Famine, Sen revealed that in many causes of famine, food supplies were not significantly reduced. In Bengal, for example, food production while down on the previous year was higher than previous non-famine years. Sen points to the number of social and economic factors such as declining wages, unemployment, rising food prices, and food distribution, which led to starvation. His capabilities approach focus on positive freedom, a person's actual ability to be or do something, rather than on negative freedom approaches which are common in economic and simply focuses on non-interference. In the Bengal famine, rural laborers' negative freedom to buy food was not affected. However, they still starved because they were not positively free to do anything. They did not have the functioning of the nourishment nor the capability to escape the morbidity. In addition to his important work on the cause of famines, Sen's work in the field of development economics has had considerable influence in the formulation of Human Development Report, published by United Nations Development Programme (UNDP). This annual publication that ranks countries on a variety of economic and social indicators owes much to the contribution by Sen, among other social choice theorists, in the area of economic measurement of poverty and inequality. Sen's revolutionary contribution to development economics and social indicators in the concept of capability developed in his article Equality of What. He argues that governments should be measured against the concrete capabilities of their citizens. This is because top-down development will always trump human rights as long as the definition of terms remains in doubt. Is a right something that must be provided or something that simply cannot be taken away? For instance, the United States citizenship have a right to vote. To Sen, this concept is fairly empty. In order for citizens to have a capacity to vote, they first must have functionings. These functionings can range from a very broad, such as availability of education, to every specific, such as transportation of the polls. Only when such barriers are removed can the citizen truly be said to act out of a personal choice. It is up to individual society to make the list of a minimum capabilities guaranteed by that society. For an example of an capabilities approach in practice is Martha Nussbaum, Women's and Human Development. He wrote a controversial articles in the New York Review of Books entitled "More than 100 million women are missing. See Missing Women of Asia, analyzing the mortality impact of unequal rights between the genders in the developing world, particularly Asia." Other studies, including one of the Emily Oster, had argued that this is an overestimation, through Oster has since then recanted her conclusions. In 1999, Sen further advanced and redefined the capability approach in his book Development Freedom. Sen argues that freedom should be viewed as an effort to advance the real freedoms that individuals enjoy, rather than simply focusing on metrics such as GDP or income per capita. Sen was inspired by violent acts he had witnessed as a child leading up to the partition of the India in 1947. On one morning, a Muslim daily laborer named Qadir Mia stumbled through the rear gate of Sen's family home, bleeding from a knife wound in his back. Because of his extreme poverty, he had come to Sen's primary Hindu neighborhood searching for work. His choices were the starvation of his family or the risk of death in coming to the neighborhood. The price of a Qadir Mia's income freedom was his death. Qadir Mia need not have come to a hostile area in search of income in his troubled times, if his family could have managed without it. This experience led Sen to begin thinking about economic freedom from a young age. In Development as Freedom, Sen outlines 5 specific types of freedoms: political freedom, economic facilities, social opportunities, transparency guarantees, and protective security. Political freedoms refer to the ability of the people to have a voice in government and to be able to scrutinize the authority. Economic facilities concern both the resources within the market and the market mechanism itself. Any focus on the income and wealth in the country would serve to increase the economic facility for the people. Social opportunities deal with establishment that they provide benefits like health care or education for the populace, allowing individuals to live better lives. Transparency guarantees allow individuals to interact with some degree of trust and knowledge of the interaction. Protective security is the system of social safety nets that prevent a group affected by the poverty being subjugated to the terrible misery. Before Sen's work, and these had been viewed as only the ends of development, luxuries afforded to the countries that focuses on the increasing income. However, Sen argues that the increase in real freedom should be both the ends and the means of development. He elaborates that upon this by illustrating the closely interconnected natures of the 5 main freedoms, as he believes that the expansion of one of those freedoms can lead to the expansion in another one as well. In this regard, he discusses the correlation between the social opportunities of education and health, and how both of these complement economic and political freedom, as a healthy and well-educated person is better suited to make informed economic decisions and can be involved in fruitful political demonstrations, etc. A comparison is also drawn between China and India to illustrate this interdependence of freedoms. Both countries were working towards developing their economies since China 1979 and India since 1991. Welfare economics seeks to evaluate economic policies in terms of their effects on the well-being of the community. Sen, who devoted his career to such issues such as conscience of his professions, his influential monograph Collective Choice and Welfare and Social Welfare 1970, which addressed problems related to individual rights, including formation of a liberal paradox, justice and equality, majority, and the availability of information about individual conditions, inspired researchers to turn their attention to issues of basic welfare. Sen devised the methods of measuring poverty that yielded useful information for improving economic conditions for the poor. For instance, his theoretical work on inequality provided an explanation for why there are fewer women than men in India. and in China, despite the fact that in the West and in the poor, out medically unbalanced countries, women have poor mortality rates at all ages, live longer, and make a slightly majority of the population. Sen claimed that this skewed ratio results from a better health treatment and childhood opportunities afforded boys in those countries, as well as sex-selective abortions. Governments and international organizations handling food crisis were influenced by Sen's work. His views encouraged policymakers to pay attention not only to alleviating immediate suffering, but also to finding ways to replace the lost income of the poor. For example, through public works and to maintain stable prices for food, a vigorous defender of political freedom, Sen believed that famines do not occur in functioning democracies because their leaders must be more responsive to the demands of the citizens. In order for economic growth to be achieved, he argued social reforms such as improvement in education, public health must precede economic reform. In 2009, Sen published a book called The Idea of Justice, based on his previous work in the welfare economics and social choice theory, but also on his philosophical thoughts. Sen presented his own theory on justice that he meant to be alternative to the influential modern theories of Justice John Rawls and Justice John Harnoncy. In opposition to Rawls, but also earlier justice theoretician Immanuel Kant, Rousseau and David Hume, and inspired philosophical works of Adam Smith and Mary. Sen developed a theory that is both comparative and realizations oriented instead of being transcendental and institutional. However, he still regards institutions and processes as being equally important. As an alternative to Rawls' wheel of ignorance, Sen chose the thought of experiment of an impartial spectator as the basis of his theory of justice. He also stressed the importance of public discussion, understanding democracy in the sense of John Stuart Mill, and a focus on the people's capability, an approach that he had co-developed, including the notion of universal human rights in evaluating various stages with regard to justice. Career of Dr. Sen. Sen began his life career both as a teacher and a researcher scholar in the development of economics, and in the department of Jadhav University as a professor of economics in 1956. He spent 2 years in that position from 1957 to 1963. Sen served as a fellow of Trinity College, Cambridge. Between 1960 and 1961, Sen was a visiting professor of MIT in the United States, where he got to know Paul Samuelson, Robert Solow, Franco Madeline, Norbert Wiener. He was also a visiting professor of University of California, Berkeley from 1964 to 1965 and Cornell University from 1978 to 1984. He taught as a professor of economics between 1963 to 1971 at a Delhi Schools of Economics, where he completed his magnum opus Collective Choice and Social Welfare in 19. During this time, Sen was also a frequent visitor to various other premier Indian economic schools and centers of excellence like Jawaharlal Nehru University JNU, Indian Statistical University. During this time, Sen was also a frequent visitor to various other premier Indian economic schools and centers of excellence like Jawaharlal Nehru University, Indian Statistical Institute, Center for Development Studies, Gokhale Institute of Politics and Economics, and Center for Studies in Social Sciences. He was a companion of distinguished economists like Manmohan Singh, ex-Prime Minister of India and a veteran economist responsible for liberalizing the Indian economy, K.N. Raj, advisor to various Prime Minister and a veteran economist who was the founder of Center for Development Studies, Trivandrum, which is one of India's primary think tanks and school, and Jagdish Bhagwati, who is known to be the greatest Indian economist in the field of international trade and currently teaches at Columbia University. This is a period considered to be a golden period of the history of DSE. In 1971, he joined the London School of Economics as a professor of economics, where he taught until 1977. From 1977 to 1988, he taught the University of Oxford, where he was the first professor of economics and fellow of Nuffield College, and then the Drummond Professor of Political Economy and a fellow of All Schools College, Oxford from 1980. In 1987, Sen joined Harvard as the Thomas W. Lamont University Professor of Economics. In 1998, he was appointed as Master of Trinity College, Cambridge. becoming the first Asian head of the Oxbridge College. In January 2004, Sen returned to Harvard. He also established a Eva Colorni Trust at the former London Guildhall University in the name of his deceased wife. In May 2007, he was appointed as chairman of Nalanda Mentor Group of examined the framework of international cooperation and proposed a structure of partnership, which would govern the establishment of Nalanda International University project as the international center of education seeking to revive the ancient center of higher learning, which was present in India from the 5th century to 1197. He chaired the social sciences with a jury for Infosys Prize from 2009 to 2011 and the humanities jury from 2012 to 2008. On 19 July 2012, Sen was named the first chancellor of the proposed Nalanda University NU. Sen was criticized as the project suffered due to the inordinate delays, mismanagement and lack of presence of faculty on ground. Finally, teaching began in August 2014. On 20 February 2015, Sen withdrew his candidature for the second term. Now the political views of Dr. Sen. Sen was critical to Indian politician Narendra Modi when he was announced as his Prime Minister candidate for the BJP. In April 2014, he said that Modi would not be a good Prime Minister. He considered later in December 2014 that Modi did give people a sense of faith that things can happen. In February 2015, Sen opted out of seeking a second term for the Chancellor post of Nalanda University, stating that the government of India was not keen to him continuing in the post. In August 2019, during the clampdown and curfew in Kashmir for more than 2 weeks after the Indian revocation of Jammu and Kashmir's special status, Sen criticized the government and said, "As an Indian, I am not proud to the fact that India, after having done so much to achieve a democratic norm in the world, where India was the first non-Western country to go for the democracy, that we lose that reputation on the ground of the action that have been taken." He regarded the detention of the Kashmiri political leaders as a classical colonial excuse to prevent blackish against the Indian government decision and called for the democratic solution that would involve Kashmiri people. Sen has spent much of latter life as a political writer and activist. He has been outspoken about Narendra Modi's leadership in India. In an interview with the New York Times, he claimed that Modi's fear-mongering among the Indian people was anti-democratic. The big thing that we know from John Stuart Mill is that democracy is government by discussion, and if you make discussion fearful, you are not going to get a democracy. No matter how you can count the votes. He disagreed with Modi's ideology of Hindu nationalism and advocated for a more integrated and diverse ideology that reflects the heterogeneity of India. Sen also wrote an article for the New York Times documenting the reason why India trails behind China in economic development. He advocates for health care reform because low-income people in India have to deal with exploitative and inadequate private health care. He recommends India implement the same education policies that Japan did in the late 19th century. However, he realizes that there is a trade-off between democracy and progress in Asia because democracy is a near reality in India and not in China. In a 1999 article in The Atlantic, Sen recommended for India a middle path between the hard knocks development policy that creates wealth at expense of civil liberties and radical progressivism that only seeks to protect civil liberties at expense of development. Rather than create an entirely new theory for ethical development in Asia, Sen sought to reform the current development model. Personal life and beliefs of Dr. Sen and the greatest economist in India. Sen was been married 3 times. His first wife was Nambanita Dev Sen, an Indian writer and scholar with whom he had 2 daughters, Antara, a journalist and publisher, and Nandana, a Bollywood actress. Their marriage broke up shortly after they moved to London in 1971. In 1978, Sen married Eva Colorni, an Italian economist and daughter of Eugenia Colorni, and Ursula Hirkesman, and a niece of Albert O. Hirkesman. The couple had 2 children, a daughter Indrani, who is a journalist in New York, and a son Kabir, a hip-hop artist, MC and music teacher at Shard School High School. Eva died at a cancer in 1985. In 1991, Sen married Emma Georgini Rothschild, who serves as a Jeremy and Jane Nobel's professor of history at Harvard University. Sens have a house in Cambridge and Massachusetts, which is the base from which they reach during the academic year. They also have a Cambridge home in Cambridge, England, where Sen is a fellow of Trinity College, Cambridge, and Rothschild is a fellow of Magdalene College. He usually spends his winter holiday at his home in Shantiniketan in West Bengal, India, where he used to go on long bike rides until recently. Asked how he relaxes, he replies, "I read a lot and I like arguing with people." Sen is an atheist. In an interview, he noted, in some ways, people had got used to the idea that India was spiritual and religion oriented. That gave a leg up to the religious interpretation of India, despite the fact that Sanskrit had a larger atheistic literature than exists in any other classical language. Madhavacharya, the remarkable 14th century philosopher, wrote this rather great book called Sarvadarshan Sangramha, which discussed all the religious schools of thought within the Hindu structure. The first chapter is Atheism, a very strong presentation of the argument in the favor of atheism and materialism. So, it is not false that he is an atheist, but India was also the atheist. I am not saying the entire nation was atheist, but I am saying there exists a thought of materialism like Charvak and atheism instead of the thoughts like Vedanta, Upanishad, Advaitism, dualism. So, India is a country with a diverse thought processing. So, this was all. I'm waiting for your suggestion for the next chapter and the next video.